GOP retreat.
I'm Wyatt Goolsby reporting in downtown Philadelphia. We'll tell you what Donald Trump had to say to Republican leaders.
A nod from the White House. Vice President Mike Pence is hosting leaders of the movement ahead of tomorrow's march. The dream goes on. Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece, Alvida, stops by to talk to me about her work in the pro-life movement. Miraculous story of survival. An Italian couple recalls 3 days of frigid darkness after last week's avalanche. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, January 26, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. For the very first time ever, a vice president will speak at the March for Life in person. The New York Times says Mike Pence will be the highest-ranking government official to speak in person at the pro-life rally. And right now, he is hosting pro-life leaders in his office. Correspondent Jason Calvi joins us from the White House. Jason.
Lauren, Vice President Pence is meeting with those pro-life leaders right now. The list includes the president of the March for Life, as well as Trump's pro-life chairwoman, Marjorie Dannenfelser. She says her message to the vice president tonight is very clear. Pro-lifers helped elect them into the White House. Now they want action. Just to put this into context, President Ronald Reagan back in 1984 waved at participants from a balcony at the White House. While he never attended himself, he did call in to greet pro-lifers. President George W. Bush also called in and supported the march, but also from afar. Last night, President Trump challenged the media for not covering the event. Reagan staffer Chuck Donovan says that's important.
It's an extraordinary level of connection with the march, as was President Trump's mentioning of the march ahead of time. I don't think promotional activity like that, if you will, urging the media to give fair and balanced coverage, has ever been a message emanating from the White House, much less from the president himself. So these are unprecedented things.
National Right to Life President Carol Tobias says the extra media attention may mean more people will see what's been going on for over 40 years.
They are going to see picture after picture after picture of young people, high school students, college students, young families bringing their little kids. It's a sign of hope and optimism. This battle isn't going to end because we have so many young people that are coming forward and saying, I am going to make a stand for life.
Today, National Right to Life released their annual report on abortion. It shows that for the first time since 1974, the number of abortions has shrunk to less than 1 million in 2014. And because the vice president will be speaking at the March for Life rally, security will be very tight. If you're going, do not bring backpacks, coolers, selfie sticks. All of these things are banned, and you'll have to also go through airport-style security to get into the rally. Lauren?
Jason, what is Mike Pence's previous connection to the pro-life cause?
Well, Mike Pence, when he was a member of Congress, pioneered the effort to defund Planned Parenthood. He also attended the marches in his 12 years in Congress. And I spoke earlier today with one of the co-founders of the March for Life, Dee Becker, and she says Mike Pence did a lot to recruit other lawmakers to attend the annual march.
Other than the vice president, who can we expect to be speaking?
We're going to also hear from President Trump's counselor, Kellyanne Conway, a pro-lifer who we've heard from many times on this program. Also speaking is New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan.
All right, Jason Calvi reporting from the White House. Thank you, Jason. President Donald Trump rallies Republicans at their annual retreat. The GOP controls the White House and Congress for the first time in more than a decade. And today, Trump tells lawmakers they will be busier than ever helping him implement a broad agenda. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby is in Philadelphia, where the president made his remarks. Wyatt?
Lauren, the president was warmly received by his fellow Republicans. Trump's broad speech, touched on Obamacare, tax reform, and building the wall, but he didn't provide any details how, for example, Congress should repeal and replace the health care law. His goal is to unite his party for the months ahead.
This is our chance to achieve great and lasting change for our beloved nation.
President Donald Trump is moving swiftly to reshape government and American society. His address in Philadelphia at the GOP retreat came a day after he began overhauling the nation's immigration rules. That prompted Mexico's president to cancel his trip to Washington next week, a remarkable move by the ally and neighbor. Trump is also making good on promises to pro-life voters.
We've reinstated the Mexico City policy, a long-standing policy. And by the way, on Friday, a lot of people are going to be showing up to Washington, right, Mike? A lot of people. You know, the press never gives them the credit that they deserve.
The president also reminded his fellow Republicans that on day one, he signed an order to roll back Obamacare. He says it paves the way for real reform and empowers individuals.
That is truly right for them that have so many choices.
Republicans hoping for a message of unity and focus are pleased.
I thought that the speech was as presidential as I've ever heard from President Trump. He was self-deprecating in places. He was humorous in places. And as you know, when you meet with him one-on-one, he's a very disarming, charming individual, and that's starting to come out now in these group meetings.
One more milestone for Trump. He took his first flight aboard Air Force One to get to Philadelphia. Several Republican lawmakers tell us they do feel like the White House has an open-door policy. If they have any questions or concerns, they can always go to the administration and ask. Lauren?
Wyatt, I understand Mike Pence was also with him in Philadelphia today, as we saw. What was his message to Republicans?
Well, the vice president also gave a speech, just wrapped it up a little earlier this afternoon. He actually mentioned Trump's upcoming announcement for his pick for the Supreme Court, which is going to be named next week. And he said that pick is going to be, and I want to get this right, he calls him going to be a strict constructionist to the high court. In other words, a jurist who has a very narrow reading of the Constitution. And many, Lauren, are hoping that that next Supreme Court justice will be in the same mold as the late Justice Antonin Scalia.
Wyatt Goolsby reporting in Philadelphia. Thank you, Wyatt. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Britain lawmakers introduce a bill to start the country's exit from the European Union.
Presentation of bill. Mr. Secretary David Davis.
The minister who is orchestrating the legislation is on a tight timetable. The House of Commons has less than 2 weeks to consider it. Prime Minister Theresa May was forced to place the matter before Parliament after a Supreme Court ruling earlier this week requiring its permission. May hopes to start the process of pulling out of the EU by the end of March. Gambia's president comes home after a political crisis that sent the longtime ruler into exile. Adama Barrow arrived in Gambia from Senegal. His return signals a new, more democratic era for the tiny West African nation. He's the country's first new commander-in-chief in more than 2 decades. The death toll from the avalanche in central Italy rises to 29, but there are stories of survival. More bodies were recovered last night, and Italy's prime minister has acknowledged delays responding to last week's tragedy, but says now isn't the time to find scapegoats. 2 of the 11 survivors are speaking out about their miraculous rescue, and they say they always believed someone would save them.
Detto è impossibile che non viene nessuno.
Qualcuno verrà a salvarci.
Vincenzo Forti, avalanche survivor, said someone will come to save us. They were sipping hot tea near the fireplace at the Mountain Resort Hotel when the avalanche hit. The 2 were trapped for almost 2 days before being pulled out by rescuers. Mary Shevlin, our Vatican correspondent, joins us from Rome. Mary, how are the Italian authorities managing this crisis?
Lauren, it's been a harrowing week, to say the least, on the heels of a harrowing 6 months here in Italy between earthquakes and avalanches. Now that all of the bodies have been accounted for, the autopsies are taking place. Of course, the avalanche is what caused the deaths, but they have to figure out, did they die from the physical trauma? Was it asphyxiation? Was it hypothermia? So all of these things are being figured out right now in the hospitals in that area. The funerals of the victims have already started to take place, and they will continue to do so over the next week or so. And of course, authorities are still digging out that hotel, trying to get more answers as to what went wrong.
There was a lot of criticism that they botched the disaster response, and I know that's being addressed. But what role is the church playing in helping people recover?
I spoke to the Secretary General of the Italian Bishops' Conference today, and I asked him that very question. And he said the bishops have been on the front lines since day one. And this is, I'm going back to August and that very big first earthquake. And he said we've been there the whole time. And the Pope is continually informed about the activities and the rescue efforts and the victims and their families. And they took a collection here in Italy, even beginning last September, a collection that has raised over $23 million US dollars to go towards relief at the parish level. Because remember, there may not be a hospital in some of these areas, but there's definitely usually a parish, a community center. They're funneling money into those places through Caritas to do makeshift hospitals, temporary schooling for the children whose schools have been destroyed. So a lot on the ground at the local level through the churches is being done.
All right, Mary Shovlin, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The 2017 March for Life is almost here, and protesters and pro-life leaders are out in full force in the nation's capital. Joining us here on set is Alveda King, Pastoral Associate for Priests for Life and the niece of Martin Luther King Jr. Welcome to our program.
Thank you, Lauren.
So grateful to have you here. President Trump, as you have seen all week, has criticized the media, saying that there isn't going to be media coverage of this event. That's not true at EWTN, where we will be on the air all day. Do you think it is going to get more coverage this year than last year?
I believe that President Trump does remarkably well with calling those things that be not as though they were. So by reminding them that they've not done it, maybe they will come.
They will do it. Maybe
Yeah.
they will. We heard
Yeah.
Jeannie Mancini, who's the president for March for Life, say that she has already seen a little bit of an uptick. You have been very open about your support for Donald Trump. Are you happy with the actions that he has made in his first week?
I'm very pleased that he gave us the Mexico City policy. I'm very pleased that during his first 100 days, he's unabashedly speaking about the pro-life movement. That is just very encouraging to me.
And do you think that going forward, this is a momentum that will continue? I know next week we're looking at a Supreme Court pick.
That is such a cryptic question. Will we go forward? Not will he go forward. So if we do our part, and when I say we, the communities that value the sanctity of life, then we can continue to move forward. He can do it, but he'll need us to help.
That is not a cryptic answer. That is a very direct answer. Okay. Your perspective on abortion. Can you share your story with us?
I can. Many people know that I had abortions in the 1970s, and I was born on January 22nd. On my birthday, Roe versus Wade passed, and in 1973 I had my second. It was a family secret, it was a church secret, and I suffered in secret for a long time until 1983 when I was born again. So the impact of abortion for a woman can be kind of secret and quiet. You won't even know that she's hurting. And no one knew that I was hurting until I spoke publicly and received healing.
Has that been cathartic for you? Is that your mission, to help other women?
My mission is to tell the truth, that life is a civil right. As Director of Civil Rights for the Unborn with Priests for Life, the little babies in the womb. We talk about the Women's March. And I say, well, what about the little baby girls in the womb, you see? And so I believe that since I've been forgiven much and healed, that I have so much to do in telling the truth.
What do you tell women who are considering an abortion?
You need love, you need help. You don't have to make this decision. There are other choices. And I work with pregnancy care centers, lawmakers, prayer warriors, activists, nonviolently. And as we get that message out, we are helping so many families.
Okay, this is beautiful. Your story is a beautiful testimony. Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you.
Alveda King. Tomorrow is the big day, the 43rd annual March for Life. If you can't make it to Washington, EWTN is your place to turn. We will have live coverage from 9 a.m. until 5:30 Eastern. I will be joined with Monsignor Pope. We'll give you the blow-by-blow. That will be followed by our regular EWTN News Nightly at 6 p.m. Coming up, Silent No More.
Everything that was told to me was a lie.
One woman shares her emotional experience after abortion. and asks researchers to listen. And the impact of Donald Trump's executive orders. We'll tell you why one could save babies around the world. A recent report suggests that women who are denied an abortion suffer worse psychological effects than women who go through with the procedure. But pro-life advocates refute the Journal of the American Medical Association. We spoke to an expert who counsels post-abortive women and a woman who has lived through the ordeal. Andy Pearson was 18 years old when she had her first abortion at Planned Parenthood. She was told it was her best option.
Everything that was told to me was a lie. You know, I didn't go back to a normal life. It wasn't quick and easy.
Decades later, Andy is a volunteer for the pro-life group Silent No More. She says her life changed dramatically after her abortion.
Drugs and alcohol became in the picture to mask the pain, to help me get through the day. And that went on for several years. And you could say I was numb. I had no emotions. I was dead.
Andy's story is a stark contrast to the picture painted by a recent study in the Journal of the American Medical Association. It claims abortion has little effect on a woman's mental health, and that women who are denied an abortion may suffer greater anxiety and lower self-esteem than women who get one. The study followed nearly 1,000 women over 5 years, but nearly 400 women dropped out over the course of the study. Teresa Burke is a psychologist and the founder of Rachel's Vineyard Ministries, an outreach program for post-abortive healing. She says women who are the most traumatized are also least likely to participate in a study like this.
Women who don't want to speak about their abortions, who don't even disclose it, are much more likely to suffer from unresolved guilt, grief, loss.
For Andy, recovery began when she returned to her Catholic faith.
I prayed and I asked God, if you don't send me somebody, I don't know what I'm going to do. And at that moment, a priest entered the church, and it took all the courage I had to go over and talk to him. And that began my healing journey.
Now she knows what she would say to the Planned Parenthood worker who convinced her to have an abortion.
You were so wrong. You were so wrong. I mean, you not only took my child, but you stole years of my life too.
What an emotional story with a happy ending. Tonight, Andy Pearson and her daughter are preparing for tomorrow's March for Life. EWTN News Nightly reached out to the primary author of the study by the Journal of the American Medical Association. She declined to speak with us. Joining us now is Gracie Christie, Policy Advisor for the Catholic Association. Gracie is also a radiologist. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Usually we interview you via Skype from Miami, so we're so glad you're here. You're here for the march?
Of course.
Of course you are. And it's filled with people here in Washington. You're not a psychiatrist, but you are a medical professional. What is your reaction to that study?
Well, I've studied the study. I've looked through it, and it had a lot of flaws. And one of it was a tiny sample size, and another was that women were being asked how they felt about not having an abortion right after they had been unable to obtain one. And of course, if a woman is trying to get an abortion, this is a very terrible moment for her, and you'd expect her to feel anxious. So over the years, we've known from several other studies that women do suffer increased risk of suicide and depression when they go through an abortion.
You do a lot of work with Hispanic and poor communities. Do the women you see on a daily basis use Planned Parenthood for prenatal care, basic health care?
No. Planned Parenthood is not a prenatal care or basic health care provider. When women need health care, they go to community health centers and places where they can get whole woman care, not something so narrow as Planned Parenthood offers.
And so therefore defunding Planned Parenthood you don't believe would hurt women's access to overall health care.
Well, no, not at all. In fact, it will free up funds for places that consider the entire woman and her actual health care needs.
President Trump this week has been doing a lot of things to support the pro-life movement. He reinstated the Mexico City policy preventing U.S. dollars from being used to fund international abortion providers. Beyond being a victory for the pro-life movement, what does this mean to developing countries from a cultural perspective?
Well, I heard from friends in Honduras and El Salvador, and the way it's viewed from that perspective is that the United States has been engaged in a cultural aggression, trying to promote values and ideologies that don't belong in those countries. They're not organic to the country. Things like abortion, like free abortion license. So the reinstitution of the Mexico City policy is a relief for them from having to struggle against that ideological colonization from the U.S.
Dr. Grazie Christie, Policy Advisor for the Catholic Association. So nice to have you on set. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, a cultural shift at the Capitol. Will pro-life legislation reshape national politics? And one man's surprise discovery outside the cathedral in St. Paul, Minnesota. Today we celebrate the memorial of Saints Timothy and Titus. They were both bishops and disciples of St. Paul. They worked closely with the apostle to spread the gospel in the 1st century. Pro-lifers have a unique opportunity to protect life now that they have the support of both the White House and Republican leaders in Congress. Joining us now, Professor Carter Snead, a professor of law and political science at the University of Notre Dame. He's also the director of the Center for Ethics and Culture and served as general counsel to President George W. Bush, his counsel on bioethics.
Yes.
That's like the longest title I've ever had to
title.
say. Yeah, you've done a lot of really good things,
Well, I try.
Let's talk about pro-life issue, and it's more than just about abortion legislation. It's a cultural challenge, and we heard Alveda King say it's what we do, not what President Trump will do. What do you think it would take to build a pro-life culture in the U.S.?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's, first of all, important to identify what kind of culture we're trying to bring about. And it's a culture of radical hospitality and generosity and welcoming of every person, every member of the human family, born and unborn, no matter what their conditions are, or whether they're wanted or not. And this happens in one-on-one interactions while we witness this sort of generosity and loving kindness, which our church has really pioneered for millennia since our Lord founded our church. And obviously at Notre Dame, at the Center for Ethics and Culture, we focus on larger vehicles of culture, literature, music, film, and the like, all of which contribute to this notion of again, a culture of hospitality. And we'll remember that, it was Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel that actually moved Abraham Lincoln in his own thinking about slavery, which I think is instructive for us in the pro-life movement.
So it's something that you can also be driven by movies and books and films, is your point.
Absolutely.
What do you think we need to do to build on the current political momentum?
We're presented with a surprising and extraordinary moment where we have a president who is willing to push forward with official actions that promote a culture of life. Obviously, being the President of the United States is an extraordinary opportunity in terms of not just vetoing legislation, shaping legislation, but also in terms of appointing Supreme Court justices, which will happen next week.
Right.
But even, and this is something that people who are not lawyers, they don't think about that often, which is to say he's also in charge of the administrative state. Every administrative agency, HHS, DOJ, the State Department, every possible agency. There are 440 agencies in Washington, D.C. that shape people's lives every single day. It was one agency, HHS, that made life difficult, miserable for the Little Sisters of the Poor.
And for EWTN.
And for EWTN, of course. You all were involved in that lawsuit as well. And this is something that President Trump can mobilize in a way to build a culture of life, both here and abroad as well.
Thank you so much for joining us. Carter Snead, Professor of Law and Political Science at the University of Notre Dame. And hello to Orlando in our studio.
That's
I hope
right.
you both enjoy
That's my boy.
I hope you both enjoy the rally tomorrow.
Thank you so much. We will.
Imagine finding a baby in a laundry basket. The custodian at a cathedral of St. Paul in Minnesota was locking up one night this month when he made a surprise discovery. The Catholic Spirit took this picture of Nathan Leonhardt in the spot where he found a newborn child abandoned inside a church entrance. Baby Nathan John was placed in the care of Child Protective Services, which is responding to numerous calls from people willing to adopt him. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Tune your TVs all day tomorrow to EWTN for live coverage of the 2017 March for Life. I'll see you again tomorrow. Good night and God bless.